What do you really know about Alzheimer's and dementia and how they correlate? Stay tuned because we have a couple of guests that can shed more light on these illnesses coming up on this episode of The Issues. Keep it locked right here. I'm Sarah Bernard, and thanks for staying with us. According to the Alzheimer's Association, there are at least 55 million people living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is actually the most common form, and it's a general term for memory loss and other cognitive abilities that seriously interfere with daily life. Welcome to The Issues. Our first guest has experienced firsthand the difficulties of being a caregiver for an Alzheimer's patient. She cared for her father several years after he had been diagnosed with the illness. Hello, Stephanie. So nice that you're here with us today. And we know it must have been a really difficult journey for you for those years with your father.
It was.
Yeah.
It really was.
And he's sadly passed several years ago.
Yes, he did.
So tell us a little bit about what that was like for you when you first started to notice changes in him. And he was relatively young, you were telling me in his 60s.
Yes, he was 66 when he was diagnosed. And he had a business, very smart, good personality, healthy. So when we found out about the Alzheimer's diagnosis, it really shook us.
And when you found out about the diagnosis, prior to that, were there things that you were noticing? Because he, like you said, he was still working, right?
Oh,
Still
absolutely. He was still working. So they were very subtle. We kind of brushed them off, but my husband he has a medical background, so he was like, I think you all need to check into this, and let's go to the doctor and let's see the neurologist. And it was small things, leaving his car running, locking himself out. Then they had the speed lights. I mean, when you get traffic tickets, when you go through the lights or whatever. So we were noticing we were getting a lot of them. And it was just very random types of things.
And things that you could almost excuse away, probably.
Exactly. He would give us a telephone number, leave a couple digits out, but that wasn't him.
Yeah.
And so we just started checking into it, went to the doctor, and they said that he had early stages of Alzheimer's. And we knew nothing about Alzheimer's. And so we started doing some research, contacted the Alzheimer's Association, and one thing kind of led to another.
So, and from that point to when he passed, how many years?
So he was diagnosed in 2008, and he passed in 2015.
Okay, so it wasn't very long, but during that time, you saw him decline fairly rapidly, would you say?
It was slow, and then it started picking up really around 2013, 14, 15 was pretty fast.
Those last few years. Okay,
Yeah.
so and you were, and still are, a full-time professional.
Yes.
So you had a job.
Yeah.
And a family of your own, and your mother was also available, but you spent a lot of time with your dad helping him, as did your mother, your family.
Absolutely. I'm the only child, so yes, there's a small family. So my husband was very supportive, so he would help. My mother was retired, in good health, thank God, so that was really helpful, but the three of us would just tag team it.
So what did that look like? So early on, not that many signs or things that were disrupting his daily life or your daily life, and then he declined slowly. So did you have to step up the amount of time that you spent with him or care that you provided to him?
We did. So he was living, my mother and father were living on their own independently, but we still would, check on them, make sure that they're okay and that type of thing. But it was starting to take a toll on her. So she needed some type of relief. So what we did, we would have a schedule, and it was kind of based on when she wanted to do things. So we would take him to adult daycare a couple of times a week. It started off maybe one day a week, and then it picked up to 2 to 3, just because
to give your mom a break.
To give her a break.
Yeah.
Because he was needing a little bit more assistance day in, day out, and it was taking a toll on her.
Yeah.
So, so I would pick him up, take him to adult daycare. When I got off work, pick him back up, and then drop him off at home. If she had something going on, my husband and I would just tag team it and maybe stay there, or either he would come to our house. But the three of us would just make it work. And he was able to eat, he was able to talk, he was able to walk. Just had to kind of go over things, you know, a few times just to make sure that he was okay and comfortable. But it got to a point that we could no longer do that.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned that you called the Alzheimer's Association early on, one of the first things you did. So how did they help you adjust to everything that he was going through?
Well, my mother was retired, as I mentioned, so she gathered all of the classes, all of the caregiver support groups that they offered, and she signed us up, it seemed like, for everything. So we went to Project Esteem, which is a support group that has families basically with all stages of the Alzheimer's disease journey, I'll say. So you got an opportunity to talk to the families, kind of hear what they're going through, and you would bring your loved one with you. So they would put us in a room, and then they would have our loved ones go in a different room because we did not want them to hear the conversations. So, but it still gave you a good idea of what to expect depending on where you were in the journey.
So were there support groups also for the loved ones, for your father, for him to learn more about the illness?
No, it was more games and keeping them,
keeping him busy.
Yeah, keeping them busy, because it would be a group of them. So it would be keeping them busy, and then we would have more of an educational kind of workshop type of thing.
Yeah. So it's been several years now.
Yes.
But you've really devoted a lot of your personal time to
yeah.
to this cause, to this illness, and helping others. So tell us a little bit about that and what you learned that you share with others now, and what advice you would give to people going through this.
Sure. My father participated with the Charles Knight Alzheimer's research study. So he joined, I want to say like 2011 and 12. And when he passed, he did give his remains to further research for Alzheimer's. I participated also in the adult study because they wanted to kind of see the correlation between a parent and a child. And minorities, African Americans, are kind of low with participation, so I really thought it was good for me to participate as well, so we could see what the correlation is. So what they will do is kind of track me throughout my life. I will do a CAT scan, a lumbar puncture, and some cognitive tests, and I'll be doing it next week, and it's a 2-day process. And basically, they just try to observe me just to see if there are any changes in my behavior.
Are they sharing the results with you of what they learn after?
Some they do and some they don't. I do ask, so because I do want to know if we see any signs. So far, so good.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to know. And then from a support group standpoint, with Project Esteem, I thought that was so helpful, and it was such a shock for us to go through that journey. I wanted to give back and make sure that other families had the resources and tools. So my church has been super supportive, Friendly Temple, and I've been doing classes kind of randomly over the years with them, but now this is year 4 of our caregiver support group, and we meet every third Saturday, and we just help families kind of get resources, the support, just kind of tell them what to expect, giving them the warning signs, just so they will have some tools to kind of navigate this process. And my sorority also joined us as well, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and we're in year 4 of it. And so those are the ways I choose to give back.
Yeah, so looking back at when your journey started, is there anything that you would have done differently now at this end of it, looking through what you did at the time?
I don't know. I want to say no. I'm a daddy's girl, so I was all hands on deck. And so
is there anything that you learned later on in the journey that you wish you had known sooner that you now share with others?
Yes, I was kind of frustrated with he would do things, say things, and I would want to have a back and forth conversation. And it was going to one of the workshops where they said, just kind of go with the flow. And so, meaning, if he's saying it's snowing outside and I see that it's sunny, Daddy, get your boots. We need to bundle up and just go with the conversation. Otherwise, it frustrates you to go back and forth. They know that something is going on with them, but they really can't put their finger on it.
Yeah.
So you nagging them or getting into a back and forth just makes the situation worse. So I would have liked to have learned that a little bit earlier in the process, but I felt like I learned it in a good enough time so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that's a great tip. It's a great tip. And you have a daughter.
I do.
So during this, she was at home and observing. Is there anything that, from the perspective of a young person, that was hard for her, or maybe made it easier for you?
Yeah, well, she loved her grandfather, so they had a great time together. She would watch them. They would do all kind of good stuff. So she was really supportive of everything. So yeah, she really did good.
And maybe easier in a sense for her to just accept what was going on.
Especially from a child.
I know.
And so, yep.
I think for
yeah.
kids, sometimes these difficult times in life are easier for them for whatever reasons.
Yeah. So they would play, and so yeah, it was really good.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and for so many people in the St. Louis area, and for giving back. I mean, that's just a wonderful gift that you can share with others, having gone through it yourself. So stay with us as we speak with a professional on this topic when we come back.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, today's topic is on Alzheimer's and dementia. We've heard from a caregiver who shared what it's like to watch a loved one go through this illness and how it led her to start an organization to help others. Now we're going to hear from a Washington University doctor to educate us more on the illnesses. Joining us is Dr. Suzanne E. Schindler, Associate Professor of Neurology at Washington University. Welcome, Dr. Schindler. So you spend your days dealing and talking and learning and educating about Alzheimer's.
That's correct.
And other forms of dementia.
That's correct. So I see patients who have memory and thinking concerns, and then I also do research on Alzheimer's disease.
So how do you spend your time? So what percentage of time is spent on research versus actually seeing patients?
So I see patients about a half a day a week, although we get quite a few phone calls, and there's a lot of needs outside of the clinic, so I help with that. And then the rest of my time, I mostly help with doing Alzheimer's disease research.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I want to talk more about that research and how you do it in just a moment. But first, let's talk about dementia and how Alzheimer's fits in under that umbrella.
Sure.
And why that's important.
So the question that I most frequently asked by patients is, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? And dementia is a general term that means that someone's had a decline in their memory and thinking, so that they can't do things today that they could do a few days ago, or a few years ago. And there are many causes of dementia. Some of them are what we call reversible, meaning that we can make them better, we can help. And then some of them are caused by progressive neurological disorders. And one of those disorders is Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is defined by these changes in the brain. We call them amyloid plaques and tau tangles. And we can diagnose Alzheimer's disease based on what we call biomarkers or tests that show us these amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain. And that's helpful to get that sort of diagnosis because it tells patients and their families what they can expect. Whether we expect that they're going to slowly have a decline and get worse, or maybe they don't have Alzheimer's and they have something else, maybe something that's reversible that we can help with.
And that's something that you can definitely diagnose, whether it's Alzheimer's or another form of dementia.
In some cases, so it really depends on the scenario. It's actually difficult to do a comprehensive dementia diagnosis. So we spend a fair amount of time and we do a fair amount of testing in many cases to figure out what's causing memory and thinking symptoms, because it's pretty nonspecific. A lot of people have memory and thinking issues. And when we get concerned is when people have significant changes in their function compared to the past. So not just forgetting keys, but when people aren't able to balance their checkbook anymore. They're not able to do their taxes. They're not able to keep track of their appointments. So that's when we really start to get concerned, and we do a more involved evaluation. And there are specific tests that we can do for Alzheimer's. In many cases, we don't do them for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason is that we don't have a specific treatment. So in many cases, if it's Alzheimer's disease, there's not a specific drug that I can offer that will effectively treat the disease. But we're doing a lot of research, and that may change in the not too distant future, so there may be an even greater need to get a clear diagnosis when someone has memory and thinking concerns.
So Stephanie talked on the prior segment about her father and how he was diagnosed early and then over 7 or 8 years progressed in the illness. What are some of those stages that may have been happening for him?
Sure. Well, when people first develop memory and thinking concerns, it's usually very subtle. And many patients and their families have difficulty pinpointing when the changes even started. So they say maybe a year ago, maybe 3 years ago. And typically it starts with very mild things, so increased forgetfulness, sometimes repeating questions, for example. So people ask you a question and then they ask you the same question half an hour later and then an hour later. Misplacing items much more frequently. We all forget our keys from time to time, but this is where people are misplacing important items on a daily basis. Missing appointments, and then sometimes forgetting things that have happened to them. So those are the sorts of things that we see pretty early in the course of the illness. And then over time, it progresses so that it affects function more and more. So where people aren't able to drive safely, they're not able to manage their finances, they need help with things like cooking, going grocery shopping. And so as the disease progresses, people become more and more dependent on their caregivers for assistance. And then next, sometimes they become unsafe to be alone, so they need someone to be with them. And as the dementia becomes more severe, they need help with really basic activities of daily living. So things like showering, going to the toilet, and then eventually sometimes even transferring from a bed to a chair. So there's quite a variety of, there's quite a spectrum of how the illness
Is
goes.
there a typical length of time that you see that decline?
It really depends on the individual. So for some individuals, it's 5 or 6 years, and for some individuals, it's 20 years. And we don't necessarily understand all the reasons why some people progress more rapidly than others. Certainly, we see that people with a lot of family support who are in good health tend to do better than people who have a lot of health issues and don't have good family support. But if it's Alzheimer's disease, if that's really the underlying cause of the dementia, we see that it progresses. So it unfortunately is a fatal disease, and we don't have a cure for it right now.
And that's where your research comes into play.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So my research has mostly been focused on improving diagnosis, and that turns out to be very important to just being able to treat the disease. So you have to identify who has it, and then using these diagnostic tests, we can also track the effects of treatments. So there are currently about 150 drugs that are in clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease. And so we have to know whether they're working or not. And sometimes it takes a really long time to figure out whether they're working. So it might take 5 years to see whether a drug really slows down the progression of dementia. And some of these diagnostic tests give us a early peek, help us cheat a little bit to know whether we think these treatments are actually helping. And that's important because these drug trials are really expensive. And so you really can't study 150 drugs for 5 years. You have to be able to pick out the people who have the illness and then to be able to see whether these treatments are likely to be effective.
Now, Stephanie talked about being in a study herself at her age now. She's going in, I'm not sure if it's annually or more often than that, where her brain is being scanned and checked. So are you involved in any of that type of research?
Yes, absolutely. So that's actually a big part of my research. So we have very good tests using brain scans, specialized brain scans, as well as spinal taps to establish whether people have these amyloid plaques and tau tangles in their brain that define Alzheimer's disease. But those are expensive tests, and those are things that we can't use as well in the clinic because they're expensive, they're not as accessible. A lot of my patients don't want to get a spinal tap. And so most of my recent work has been on developing a blood test for Alzheimer's disease.
Interesting.
And we have really made a lot of progress in the last few years.
That's amazing that through blood you can tell what's happening in the brain.
It is. So 5 years ago, we didn't think it was possible, but there's quite a number of researchers at WashU who've really done amazing work developing these, we call them biomarkers or tests, and they really work quite well. So the first blood test for Alzheimer's disease in the world was developed at WashU and is now available in the clinic. And there are more tests. There's likely to become many more tests available in the next few years. And I think that's really going to change the way physicians like me approach patients when they come into the clinic with memory and thinking concerns.
So let's talk, and we have a couple minutes left. I want to talk about what we can do to help maybe delay the onset of dementia illnesses or prevent. I don't know if that's even a possibility, probably not, but give us some hope. Tell us what we can do at younger ages to help our brain stay healthy.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, we don't have kind of a magical treatment or way to prevent this, but we do know that healthy living and good lifestyle choices can really help. So those are things like diet and exercise. We think that the Mediterranean diet, for example, is a good diet, so lots of fruits and vegetables and not as much saturated fat. And we think that sleep is really important, which is something that we didn't always understand, but it seems that getting good sleep at night is very helpful. And then staying physically active and mentally active, both, is very helpful in keeping your mind sharp. Those things won't help 100%. I still have patients who are extremely healthy and active who end up getting the disease, but we think that they do help and they will reduce risk for developing dementia.
And going back to sleep, so a lot of people as they get older have a hard time getting quality sleep. Is it the quality of sleep or the length of sleep that's important, or both?
It's definitely both. And one thing that we didn't really appreciate maybe 20 years ago is that a lot of people have sleep disorders, like obstructive sleep apnea. That really was not a common diagnosis 20 years ago, but now we know that a lot of people have sleep disorders, including sleep apnea, and we can treat them. So there are treatments that we can give that significantly help that. And I would say that that's one of the most common diagnoses in my memory clinic of patients with really mild memory symptoms is sleep apnea. And in terms of quality or quantity, so if someone has sleep apnea, that really in many cases reduces the quality of their sleep, and sometimes they have to sleep longer. And so we think both of those aspects are important.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schindler, for sharing all of this great information with us today, and for the work that you're doing in the lab to help all of us as we progress through through life. Each guest has informed us on what it's like to care for a patient with Alzheimer's or dementia, as well as the changes that we should be looking for as signs of these illnesses. And lastly, we're going to hear from a member of the Alzheimer's Association to let us know what they do to help with these illnesses as well. Stay with us.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
As we wrap up, now joining us is Ben Molina, the Program Manager of the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Missouri Chapter. Hello, Ben. I'm so glad to have you here today. And you all are located right here in St. Louis.
Yes.
Right here in our community. And you're wearing purple. So let's talk about that because everyone's been wearing purple today.
Yeah, purple is the official color of the Alzheimer's movement. And this month in November, we're celebrating Alzheimer's Brain Awareness Month. So we're raising awareness here in the community to let everybody know that this is impacting people here in the St. Louis area.
Yeah, and it's amazing. We've heard from Stephanie and her story of caring for her father, and then Dr. Schindler and all the work they're doing right here at Washington University to help with the illnesses of dementia, including Alzheimer's and especially Alzheimer's. So what is it that you all do to help also the caregivers and the medical community who are dealing with Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Association is the largest nonprofit providing care and support services and raising funds for researchers so that we can find a cure for this disease. And so we provide support to families who are, or individuals who are just having memory changes. Maybe they've been recently diagnosed, they're caring for someone with the disease, or maybe they're just interested in learning more. And so all of our services are free of charge, and we have them in person in the community as well as virtually. But we have education programs, support groups, early stage programs like the one that Stephanie participated in, as well as we do a lot of advocacy work.
Yeah, and Stephanie said that one of the very first things that her family did after her father was diagnosed was contact you all and get information and educate themselves as much as possible. Does that happen a lot? Do you see people with early diagnosis calling you or their family calling you just to learn, to get educated?
Yeah, we really have families calling us across the whole spectrum of the disease, from pre-diagnosis to end-of-life care. And it's really easy to get a hold of the Alzheimer's Association. We have a 24/7 helpline that's available all day and night, and families can call us and talk with a dementia expert and get connected with services. And that number is 800-272-3900.
So 800-272-3900. Okay, I'm checking my memory skills. But no, that's really great. 24/7, someone answering the phone, because oftentimes it's during those odd hours, the late night or early morning, when we just need to reach out to somebody. So that's a wonderful service that you provide. So what is there anything that you have learned at the Alzheimer's Association to help families really with those early diagnoses, just to feel more comfortable?
So I think what we want to do is create a safe environment so that anybody can come in and learn, because we know that there continues to be stigma around this disease, that people feel uncomfortable in talking about their memory changes. So we're creating a comfortable and safe space for anybody who is interested in learning more to come and get together. and learn about it.
Good. So anything coming up that you want to make sure people know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So holiday season is coming up, and we know that a lot of people are getting ready for their holiday celebration. So we put on a yearly program called Joy in the Seasons, where we are giving caregivers the tools so that their holiday celebrations can go off as easy and they can be as joyful as possible. So we have that coming up on November 10th and November 12th, and all families have to do to register is call our 24/7 helpline number.
And you were saying when we were talking before the show about how the holidays can be especially difficult because we all have memories of our being with our family when everyone was healthy, and what those holiday traditions are, and it can be especially challenging to go through the holidays with someone who's not right there in the moment with us due to their disease. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, or perhaps the commotion of the joy of the celebration can be overwhelming for the person living with the disease. So there's lots of tips that we teach caregivers during this class.
That's awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on behalf of the Alzheimer's Association and sharing with our community all the things that you offer so much and free of charge, as you said. I'd also like to say thanks to each and every one of you who tune into the issues and share your comments. And I just want to remind everyone that you too can join the discussion. Be sure to check us out online and on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to download the free STL TV app. Be sure to tune in to the next edition of The Issues, where we'll have another informative and interesting topic that you'll definitely will not want to miss. Enjoy your day. I'm Sarah Bernard.